Hello, I'm Bill Bullard with R-CALF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, lately I've been reading what appear to be children's stories. At least they read like children's stories. The stories say the cattle market is fully competitive and functioning just the way it's designed to function. They say that wholesale and retail beef prices are extraordinarily high simply because beef is in short supply, and that cattle prices are low simply because there is a limited demand for cattle. So all that is needed, they say, is for workers to return to work and problem solved. So there it is, the explanation you've all been waiting for. But as everyone but the authors of these stories know, that explanation is as authentic as stories about Jack and the Beanstalk and Pinocchio. So let's look at U.S. Department of Agriculture or USDA statistics to see how long Pinocchio's nose has grown. First, the stories claim that beef is in short supply. The USDA reports that domestic beef production has increased every year since 2015, so it has increased year over year in each of the past 6 years. And U.S. beef consumption has likewise increased year over year during each of the past 6 years. Let's look at 2020, the year your fed cattle were at the low average price of under $109 per hundredweight, well below the cost of production. 2020 was the year of all-time record high beef prices as well. In 2020, domestic production was the highest in 6 years. And when you add production, beginning stocks, and imports together, we find that the total available beef supply in 2020 was at a 6-year record of 31.2 billion pounds. So then we exported just under 3 billion pounds of that, leaving 28.2 billion pounds to service domestic beef consumption. So if Pinocchio is telling the truth, that there is a shortage of beef, then domestic consumption in 2020 must have been above 28.2 billion pounds. But it wasn't. USDA statistics show the domestic consumption in 2020 was only 27.6 billion pounds. This means in 2020 there was an oversupply of beef available in the U.S. market, an oversupply of between 1/2 and 3/4 billion pounds of beef. And then there's the cold storage report provided by the CME Group for 2020. It reported that beef in cold storage was well above the 5-year average as 2020 neared its end. It stated, total beef and boneless beef in cold storage are the highest levels since 2017, while beef cuts are at the highest since 2018. A more recent report from May of this year states beef cuts in cold storage are up 13% year over year. So the actual statistics show the U.S. had more beef than it could either consume or export in 2020, and that beef is being stockpiled in cold storage at increasing volumes. It's looking like Pinocchio's nose is growing. So now let's turn to the story's chapter that says demand for cattle is low. There's been year-over-year increases in domestic beef consumption for the past 6 years. In fact, per capita beef consumption has increased over 4 pounds per person during this time. So when has demand for domestic cattle ever been low when both total beef consumption and per capita consumption was increasing dramatically? In 2020, about 815,000 fewer cattle were slaughtered than in 2019. But production increased in 2020 despite slaughtering fewer cattle, as did the total available beef supply, as we already mentioned. There's simply nothing in these data that supports the notion that there is a reduced demand for domestic cattle. But what's missing from this discussion are imports. In 2020, the volume of beef and cattle imports from around the world was at an all-time record high. This includes imports of beef and live cattle converted to beef, known as the beef equivalent of live cattle. What is happening here is not that there is reduced demand for domestic cattle. What's happening is the demand for domestic cattle is being displaced with more and more imports. So why should the packers bid more for your cattle when they can satisfy beef demand and demand for domestic cattle with lower cost imports? After all, consumers don't know the difference because they don't have country of origin labeling or COOL information on their beef. To them, beef is beef, whether it is produced in Uruguay, Brazil, or the United States. So help us put these children's stories to rest by signing our COOL petition at demandusabeef.com. And please go to our website at r-calfusa.com to get more information and, very importantly, to join with us as a member so we can restore competition to your U.S. cattle markets. With that, have a productive week. Thank you and goodbye.